Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this video, let's focus on the Laci and Scott Peterson case. Through the years, I have noticed many social media outlets and television networks alluding to this case as one in similarity to Chris Watts. After reviewing the facts of both cases, I tend to disagree. Now keep in mind, this crime happened in December of 2002, before there was social media. Most of us still had home phones, and the only time we used our cell phones was when it was necessary, so that we didn't use all of our minutes. I originally followed this trial from start to finish and did it like many others by watching larger networks such as Court TV and Nancy Grace. Back then, I was a fan of Nancy Grace and appreciated her sharp opinions, until I landed myself in a constitutional law class with a brilliant professor. He took this very case and taught me how to see it from an objective view and how to utilize law, not emotion, to quote-unquote prosecute a case. Man, did it change things for me. So as I take the plunge back into the Laci Peterson case with a fresh perspective, I hope you will join me and discuss if we believe that what's discovered is enough to sway a different verdict. As with any case, let's start at the beginning. Who was Laci Peterson? Laci Denise Rocha was born May 4th, 1975, with a joyful personality. Her mother, Sharon Rocha, states in her book, For Lacey, that she later received the nickname JJ for Jabberjaws, because she was quite the talker. Lacey was always calling her mother or friends to chat. Her parents were Sharon and Dennis Rocha. They later divorced when Lacey was 2, but developed a relationship with time as co-parents. Sharon later moved in with Ron Gransky, but never married. That's an interesting story, so definitely go check out the book. I won't take you year by year with Lacey because, in my opinion, her mother gives a wonderful recollection filled with family memories and insight. This is one of the very first things I noticed as a difference between this case and the Watts. It was through listening to her audiobook that I had that moment of wow. I will post the link for the book down below in the description. Lacey had a smile that just drew you in, and at least for me personally, I remember seeing her picture for the first time when it was announced that she was missing. Something about her just caught my attention. Maybe it was because she was a cheerleader in high school like me and smiled all the time. Or maybe because of the stories I heard about how she was trying to decorate their house perfectly for a family and entertaining guests. I think that's what lures most of us into true crime. For some, it may be just entertainment, but for others, for the survivors, for those who currently face a concerning or questionable reality, it hits you differently. Hence why we look back at the love, life, and loss of Laci Peterson. Honesty is a great start. Her mother and family did a great job of being open about not only the positives, but some of the struggles Laci endured throughout her years. It gives us a simple snapshot into her life and personality as seen by her mother and close friends. We can never reach a point of successful prevention if we fail to talk about all of those involved, as they are humans rather than just another headline or case number. Pretending they are perfect in death doesn't contribute anything positive from the tragedy, especially if we need to study the family dynamics. Then we can better understand the case and the crime. It's my opinion that Laci's mother very well may have laid the groundwork to uphold a conviction, even if he were to get a new trial. It's my belief that the bombshell evidence she states in the book, as well as Laci's medical records, better explained, will be enough to close that loophole of reasonable doubt in a second trial. That is, unless the eyewitnesses claiming to have seen Laci that morning genuinely did see Laci, in the testimony of the mailman. Laci graduated high school and was accepted into her number one choice school for college, San Luis Obispo. She had a controlling boyfriend her senior year of high school who followed her to college. His name was Kent. Kent later attended the same college as Scott Peterson. Laci found a place to rent in Morro Bay while she attended college. I think it's important to note that Laci was accompanied by her mother and family to help her get settled into her home while away at college. This, along with the weekend trips they spent together just hanging out and being more like friends, is indicative of their closeness and communication. By the end of her freshman year, she broke up with Kent. Kent lived with her for a short time, but soon after their relationship ended, he moved on. Kent went on later, according to Lacey's mother, to shoot his new girlfriend in the back and was sentenced to 15 years in a Washington prison. He later declared he still loved Lacey. She dodged a bullet with that one, literally. Tell me if you've ever heard this line before. Once, fill in the blank. In this case, that would be Lacey. So once Lacey set her mind to something she really wanted, she didn't change it. Sharon Rocha used this phrase to describe Lacey. Let's come back to this later. Think about that for a moment. What do you think can be learned from a statement like that? Lacey met Scott at a restaurant, the Pacific Cafe. She had some spunk and gave him her number. Their first date was deep sea fishing. Talk about irony. Sometime in the beginning, Scott told Lacey he enjoyed fine wine, golfing, and traveling. Pay close attention to that. We'll come back. Typical new relationship details that we now see listed on dating app profiles. I mean, think about it. Today we see a person's name, age, list of preferences, and 5 to 10 photos from all angles and 32 different filters, when back then, these were the fun get-to-know-someone conversations you had over dinner. Times have changed for sure. I remember going on a date as a single mom. My girlfriends had done their research, and I sat at dinner for the first 10 minutes trying to appear intrigued as this guy told me what he did for work and where he worked, knowing good and well I already had this information prior to even starting the date. You would think with the information we have at our fingertips today, we would see some of this mess coming a mile away. But the most dangerous red flags aren't always the same shade of red. And isn't love blind anyway? Hang tight, we'll get there. Just a little more background. Lacey fell hard and fast in love with Scott. Both Sharon and Ron felt initially that Scott was too good to be true. Nonetheless, they were eager to get to know him better. Scott was quite the romantic and went all out the first time he met Lacey's mother, Sharon, bringing both Lacey and Sharon flowers. Roses, to be exact. Scott didn't volunteer information, but was able to hold a conversation. Scott and Lacey rented a couple small places prior to moving to Modesto. There was an incident that Sharon mentions in her book where Scott was fired from a golf course for missing money. It would be nice to have more information on this. However, it was dismissed by Lacey because she trusted Scott was telling her the truth. Not long after that, Lacey and Scott were engaged in December 1996. Scott proposed without a ring, but Scott was quote-unquote getting one soon from a friend in San Francisco. Scott asked Sharon and Ron for their blessing on the engagement. Mind you, this was after Lacey had already called and said they were getting married. Lacey actively planned their wedding, attention to detail, including Scott's tux. Why does this matter? We will discuss this. Laci Peterson and Lacey appeared to have a close relationship. During their engagement, Lacey learned a lot about the family dynamics of the Petersons. That's a video on its own, but from what I gather, Lacey was inquisitive and would often turn to her mother with questions about things she didn't understand. Lacey was very bothered by the idea that Jackie led her to believe an image of a life when reality was so different. It was a lie. We'll definitely talk about image soon. They were married for a few years when Lacey got a marketing job that required her and Scott to have a period of long distance while married. It was then that the first affair happened. Lacey took the dog, Mackenzie, and came home on the weekends. Scott lived with 3 other single guys at this time and began acting, per Lacey, single. He applied for jobs but was always having an excuse for why he didn't want to move. This is something to take note of. She was very close to her mother and yet still did not disclose this to her mom. Sharon only found out this about the affair later on in the investigation. I'd like to take a quick moment, guys, because I have been trying to record this video and the weather outside seems to want to be included. So if you hear some rumbling in the background, just know that it is a severe thunderstorm that's going on outside. And I keep putting off recording because I didn't want to have the background noise. But I really want to get this video out. So you guys just bear with it. Thank you. Scott sold his share of the family business, and then Scott and Lacey opened their first business together, a place called The Shack. After a year, they sold the business in 2000. They didn't hold on to it very long, but according to Sharon, she mentions a time where she was having dinner with them, and I guess Scott's phone kept ringing off the hook, and so it was constant. So they realized very quickly that owning a business was going to be demanding a lot of them. In June 2000, Scott and Lacey moved to Modesto. This video that you're seeing now is surveillance footage, or I should say evidence footage of the search warrant that occurred. Scott enjoyed morning Starbucks plain coffee and eventually moved up from a large sprinkler system based out of Spain to a fertilizer salesman. And Lacey, per her mother, marketed wine and stocked shelves at a local grocery store. Now, it's important to note they did not just move straight into their house on Covina. They did live with Lacey's parents for a little while, and during this time was when they were working these jobs in order to save up enough money to purchase their first home. Around this same time, Lacey was full of questions for her mother regarding pregnancy and childbirth. Scott remained quiet during these conversations. It's not completely unheard of, but worth noting. They wanted to buy a house and were working the jobs needed to make their dreams come true. Still, with a college degree, Lacey worked with marketing wine and stocking grocery store shelves. I did notice her mother uses the term marketing wine, and I know someone who does a similar job, but it's similar to an MLM format. There aren't any indications that this was an MLM type of job, but back then, the only widely known ones that I remember or recall were Avon, Mary Kay, and Tupperware. At least those are the only ones I can think of. Regardless, they knew they had to work hard to build their dreams. 523 Covina became their home together in October 2001. Lacey saw potential, and with hard work, she and Scott really brought the home to life. Lacey's focus was pouring her heart into her home. Eventually, Scott and Lacey hosted their housewarming party. This went well, according to Lacey's mother, but she mentions in her book a phone call that she received from Lacey, sobbing and in tears. Lacey had overheard her sister-in-law say that she and Lacey's brother were expecting their baby. This was the first time that Scott had made it known that he didn't want children. He wasn't, quote-unquote, ready, and didn't know if he would ever be, according to Lacey. That Thanksgiving, she mentioned to her mother that she was going to stop her birth control pills, and Sharon made sure to double check with Lacey that Scott really wanted a baby, to which Lacey replied, "Oh yeah, he said he's ready." I must say that I applaud Mrs. Rocha for questioning this decision. She wasn't questioning because she didn't want a grandchild. She was looking out for her daughter. Too many times asking questions is seen as being negative or nosy, when in this situation it was absolutely understandable. It was insightful. This is one of those quote-unquote red flags that appeared to be gray. Sure, having a baby is exciting when both parties are eager to start a family. But what about when a spouse has to be sold on the idea of having a baby? Lacey's stepfather, Ron Gransky, used to go fishing when he needed to clear his head. He had begged and asked Scott to go many times previously, and eventually he agreed. Even during this trip, it should be noted Scott did not pack the right lures or seem to have much experience with fishing. This is, in my opinion, it's important when taking the fishing trip to the bay into account later on. Scott claims to have bought the boat and was going to surprise Ron, and that Lacey knew about it. What do you think about that? Does it make sense that he went fishing, or maybe that's just what an inexperienced boater calls taking the boat out for a test run? Either way, it's my opinion Scott was not an avid fisherman. Lacey publicly announced stopping her birth control pills and wine to her friends. She was the woman ready for the American dream of having the house, hubby, and the baby. Lacey, who usually ate pretty healthy, began to announce that she would no longer be enjoying wine because, quote unquote, they were going to try to have a baby. She believed he was on board. Quite the contrast. On Christmas Eve 2001, Scott had made the comment that he was praying for infertility to his friends. Does this sound familiar? How many couples do you know where one person pushes to get married or have a baby when the other may not be on board? This is something that is socially accepted depending on who you ask, and it unfortunately can be life-changing one way or the other. It can certainly create chaos out of what should be a beautiful life event. This is something we'll discuss more in detail on the live. By June 9th, Sunday, was the day Lacey found out she was pregnant with baby Connor. A coincidence here that Shanann Watts posted on June 10th the pregnancy announcement for baby Nico. That evening, the couple came over to visit with family. Scott didn't comment or show any excitement. Lacey joked about him having a midlife crisis, but Scott was completely checked out. Lacey was visibly troubled, according to her mother. This is the moment Sharon identifies as the moment she questions if Scott began to think about how he could avoid being a father. Sharon had difficulty hiding her concern for Lacey. She was worried that she wouldn't survive the pregnancy, but the reasons why she was so worried were unclear. As scary as her mother's intuition. It should be noted that while reluctant, Scott did attend the majority of the doctor's appointments. By mid-July, Scott was out of town and Lacey arrived at Sharon's house and was upset that she had lost the sonogram. She remembered leaving it on the front seat of the car. According to Sharon, she and Lacey went even back into a parking lot and searched up and down and couldn't find it. The sonogram was later copied from the doctor and given to Sharon. Sharon states to this day it's the only picture she's ever gotten of her grandson. Did this sonogram get lost due to pregnancy brain, or was it intentionally thrown out by Scott prior to him leaving for his trip? As found in Lacey's journal, she mentions OBGYN appointment today, heard the heartbeat. Smaller things were happening almost daily and in front of the parents, but obviously it wasn't the bigger issues behind closed doors. Nevertheless, one example Sharon mentions is Lacey watching her friend's child play in the swimming pool. Scott was more moody at this time, and when questioned about it, Lacey just responded with, "He's just been working hard." Sharon notes she had never seen this side of him. Was he just being cranky from being tired or bothered about the noise with the little one there? This stands out to me because much like the behavior panel on YouTube states, you can't take one behavior and state that it's indicative of deception, but it's when you get a group of expressions that one can better draw a conclusion. Do you see why these little gray flags all add up to one big red one? On September 24th, 2002, Lacey called to say, "It's a boy," and then later showed up with a sonogram in hand to show her mom in person. Fast forward a little bit, let's take some note of some medical concerns. Lacey always walked the same path every morning with Mackenzie. She always carried water with her, and in late October, Lacey became dizzy and sick to her stomach, different from morning sickness, according to Lacey. This can be noted and seen in the medical records that the OBGYN released in Discovery. A few days later, the same thing. She had a dizzy spell and nausea. No vomiting. Lacey called the doctor. This is the appointment. She was recommended to not walk that much anymore. Again, we are going to go over this form in detail. She was told to take it easy and began a pregnancy yoga class. Around November 1st, Lacey initially complained to her mother that her friend was naming her son the same name. In my opinion, this was a little bit of information. Just allows us to understand and see the connection between Lacey with her mom and the fact that Lacey was 27 years old. As it would any of us, she was a little pained that baby's name would be the same thing, and we all know naming a baby is a very big deal. This couple can be seen being interviewed on the Tubi special Scott Peterson Ultimate Betrayal, and they talk about their friendship in more detail. It's definitely worth going over to look at. They eventually laughed it off, and from then on it didn't seem to bother her anymore. This friend still to this day holds on to baby Connor Peterson's baby shower invitation with the January date of 1/11/2003. November 14th, Connor Latham Peterson, Lacey's journal entry states how wonderful pregnancy was for her. 6 days later, Scott met Amber Frey. Lacey wasn't up for a Disneyland trip, but it was the plan from the Petersons family. They threw her a baby shower. And November 24th, Scott and Lacey went to Sharon and Ron's for dinner. Lacey expressed that Scott joined the country club and made mention that she would even see him less than she already does. Not exactly something you want to ponder when a little one is about to arrive. Anyone who has ever had a newborn as a single parent knows just how intense it can be, not to mention feeling that way and actually being married. November 26th, they drove to Disneyland. She was pushed around in a wheelchair because it was too hard for her to walk. Allegedly, Scott was quiet and on his cell phone most of the time, to none other than Amber Frey. According to Lacey's journal, Jackie always criticized everything about Lacey. Home decor, mannerisms. She even found fault with Lacey's thank you note. Just makes me wonder if at this time the Petersons already knew about Scott's infidelity. Think about the interview they did during the trial. I'll make sure I find that clip for you. It's my opinion that Scott's father's reaction said it almost as profoundly as Chris Watts' dad's reaction in the interview room and Cindy's emotional affair statement. But let's not get sidetracked. December 1st, new baby name, Logan. Still thinking of Connor. And that was the last entry in Laci Peterson's diary. December 6th, 3 days after helping Amber pick out a Christmas tree, this was the day that Scott was confronted about being married. He told Amber's friend that his wife had died. December 7th, he searched for a boat. December 8th, he searched the currents in San Francisco Bay. December 9th, he purchased the boat for $1,400. December 14th, Amber introduced Scott as her boyfriend, and this is the Christmas party photo with Amber and Scott that we've seen. While Lacey was at a friend's party, alone, Scott insisted he had to meet this businessman on a specific date. Scott and Lacey went to pawn some of her jewelry inherited to her by her grandmother. Lacey was annoyed and distant from Scott. She never mentioned selling the jewelry to her mother, and it's even reported that Lacey left her driver's license at home. Again, is this pregnancy brain, or was she doing it on purpose? And Scott had to re-sign all of the paperwork. Sharon mentions not knowing the significance of selling the jewelry. It's noted in her sister's testimony, something we'll definitely look into some more as well. The estimated inheritance, in my opinion, is important enough to look up. Lacey attended the Christmas party alone. Lacey and Scott invited Sharon and Ron over to watch a favorite TV show the following day, sort of like a movie night double date. Sharon's account for not ever being able to feel the baby Connor move is just heartbreaking. That night, I wish I could ask just a few questions to Miss Rocha. For example, what was the tone of Scott's voice as he toasted to Mom for having such a wonderful daughter? Was it genuine, nice, nasty, passive-aggressive? Lacey was eager to share with her mother the new addition of decor in the nursery. They spent some sweet moments in the nursery before returning to finish the show. December 16th, Sharon invited Scott and Lacey for Christmas Eve dinner. She spoke with Lacey twice and was unable to get Scott to commit until later in the week. Lacey insisted she was wanting to host the Christmas morning brunch. Sharon makes mention of offering to bring Christmas cookies to Lacey, but that Lacey declined. She wishes she would have done that because she would never see Lacey again. They played phone tag on December 23rd. Sharon still had not heard a confirmation from Lacey about Christmas Eve dinner. Lacey called late that evening to confirm dinner and gab about the most recent doctor's appointment that day. They discussed the dinner guest list and new traditions with Christmas. Lacey's last words to her mom were, "I'll see you tomorrow. I love you. Good night." And with that, we will start to break this case up from day one, utilizing the documents released in the discovery. According to statistics per the CDC for pregnant women homicide. When the perpetrator is known, the largest proportion of homicide cases during or around pregnancy occurs at the hands of an intimate partner. The National Violent Death Reporting System, or NVDRS, is a repository of data on all suicides, homicides, and other forms of violent death in the United States. An analysis of 2003 through 2007 from the 16 states in the NVDRS at that time found a pregnancy associated with homicide rate of 2.9 per 100,000 live births, with 45.3% associated with IPV. Another study using the 2003 to 2015 data from 27 states found that of the 8,078 female victims older than age 10 whose perpetrator was identified, 59.2% of the time were killed by an intimate partner, with 98.6% of those victims killed by a male intimate partner. In part 2, we will discuss the questions noted in this episode, as well as take an in-depth look at the evidence that could make or break a motive. I will review questions in the comment section and include answers to those most frequently asked. I look forward to joining you again soon, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you guys later. Bye.